Psychology in Seattle.
Hey, deserving listeners. Today we have a special guest back on the podcast, Laura Gransberry, formerly Laura Matthews, a teacher at Antioch who specializes in a lot of things, family therapy and otherwise, but also on how to help people to start their private practices after graduation. I get questions about this all the time. You know, this is graduation week for some students.
Right.
And 3 of my case consultation students are graduating, and all of them are going into private practice.
That's awesome.
And they all have questions. They all know about you.
Good.
They have your handouts. They know your website.
Yeah.
Some of them may have even gone to your trainings and whatnot. And I was talking with my wife before you came over, and she's like, "What's the podcast about today?" And I was like, "Well, it's about, how to, Laura, colleague of mine at Antioch, she specializes in helping people start their private practice." And Stacy, my wife, she said, "Well, you do that too, right?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, but not to the extent that Laura does." I mean, Laura actually gets all the forms and the links and the specific numbers and checklists and very specific advice on all sorts of things, because opening a practice is pretty complicated. And I feel confident that with my supervisees, I can sort of muddle my way through it over the first 6 months to 12 months or something.
Yeah.
But it's probably better if there's a course that you can take online or in person that just walks you through all the steps. And then you have it all there. It's all accurate. You spend the time to make sure that there's no mistakes. I'm basing a lot of my information, if not all, on anecdote and experience. Right. And and I don't write anything down. So, I'm sure some of it's wrong. In fact, yesterday I said something stupid in class. I said something like, so-and-so can help you get your agency associated license. And then the student said, no, that's not right. And I was like, oh. And it made me wonder, man, am I just saying stuff without really knowing it? So I have been for a while telling people to go to you, Laura, to actually get all this stuff down. So I thought today we would talk with Laura again, because you are unveiling a new service, right? An online service.
Correct. So we started doing live courses, which the last time I was on the podcast talking about this, that's what we were talking about. We were doing a workshop, seminar type of thing. And the feedback that we got was resounding, and thank you for doing this. This is so needed, and all of those wonderful things. But also that people wanted a way to do this on their own time, in their own way, on their own schedule. I got inquiries from, because this podcast reaches so many people, inquiries from other states, people in other states wanting, access to this material. And so we went back to the drawing board and really decided to make this a digital offering so people could do this in their own time, on their own schedule. And with that overhaul, we overhauled all the material. Of course, it's just like a whole new edition, really. We decided to write a book. It started out as we were laughing about this the other day, that
You're talking about you and your husband.
Me and my husband, yeah. We are the ones that, Dustin and I started this. When we started out with this, it was one version, and then it has evolved and grown into this monster of stuff, and we're really proud of it. I re-listened to the podcast that we did last time, and you had made a comment about how we were signing up for sort of this big venture, right? These years of effort, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. When you said that, my response was like, "Oh, I guess we are." And now sitting here today, I'm like, "Oh no, we signed up for something big here."
Yeah, I mean the need is there.
Yeah.
Therapists are not necessarily good business people. Some are. For example, I had a business degree. My BA is in business.
Right.
Not that necessarily made me good at opening a private practice, but at least I had some knowledge of accounting
right.
and marketing. I had been exposed to certain concepts. But most therapists have like a lit degree or a psychology degree or a
Right.
sociology degree or
Communications.
degree, and don't have a mind. I mean, yesterday we had like, because in the last case consult, so in case consultation, they're an internship, and we have them for 15 months.
Right.
It's 6 students. They get to know each other very well. I get to know them very well. They get to know me very well. And in the last meeting of the quarter, some people are usually graduating, and we had 3 people yesterday graduating, and there's tears, and we're all saying goodbye.
Yeah.
And then we just sort of stopped that exercise, because usually we bump up against the end of class and then we say goodbye. But there was a half hour left in this kind of session, so it was in this meeting, and so I was like, well, does anyone have any other questions? and so we started talking about private practice, and I think maybe someone asked like, well, what's one thing that you think people need to know? And I was like, oh, taxes.
Yeah.
So I actually I reviewed how to pay quarterly taxes,
Right.
why you pay quarterly taxes, how to pay taxes as being self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just learned that on the fly over the past 20 plus years.
Right.
Back in the day, I would go to, Circuit City, and I would get a CD-ROM with TurboTax on it.
Yeah, remember that.
And I, would insert that into my computer, and it would
Yeah.
walk me through the wizard, and it would pump out this thing, and now they have this online thing, and just slowly over time, like, wait, so I can count meals, and
Right.
I can write off my mileage on certain things, and just little details like that,
Right.
and getting burnt on not paying my taxes every quarter,
Right.
and getting penalized by the federal government,
Right.
and it's like, well, who was there to tell me that? No one. I just had to muddle my way through it. And so what is so important is that products like yours is so important. And so today we're going to go into some specifics.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just going to necessarily plug your product, which I want to do, but we're also going to provide some advice, because there's a lot of people out there in private practice. About half of our listeners are practitioners or
Yeah.
clinicians. And I would say at least half of them are in private practice. So a good quarter of the people that we're talking to right now are in
Right.
private practice. And just going over the basics. So let's do that. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Laura?
I'm Laura Gransberry, formerly Laura Matthews. I am also a teacher at Antioch University. I am in private practice in West Seattle, and I also do this project with my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your husband is a business internet guy,
Yeah.
not a therapist.
Correct. It's interesting. He started out as in one of his past lives, a nutrition coach, health and nutrition coach. So
Oh.
he has built a private practice, which is why he was so confident that I could do it when we first met. So he was sort of that push in that direction because he had built it. But also his undergrad experience and what he's doing currently is he goes into companies and he helps them build their business. So he's the marketing business side of this circle, and I'm like the knowledge side of all the therapy, and what people would need to know and all of those things.
So before we go into some specifics, where can they find so you're going to offer this to people around the country who want to start a private practice. Where do they find you online?
It's at openyourpractice.com/access. So you can, if you go to the /access portion, you plug in your email address and you can get on our newsletter, which will come out weekly and have special exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. Like we have a YouTube channel and we're on social media and those things, but for people that are part of the newsletter, they're going to have a special sort of weekly exclusive nugget of info.
So you're going to have a YouTube channel?
We currently do. It's up.
And you've posted videos?
Yes.
Are you going to have a podcast?
It's coming soon.
Okay.
We're going to do all the things. Yeah.
Great. And what the podcast will be called, Open Your Practice?
Correct. Yep.
All right. So what's a tip for people in private practice that you can grant them?
8, just one?
As many as you want.
There's lots of, to pick one, the list is endless. We were just going through this the other day of ideas for the podcast and ideas for YouTube videos, and we just keep coming up with so much content, things to tell people. I would say one of the first things is to breathe is like the first tip. I'll give some deeper ones here in a minute, but you have to confront the fear that you have around this first. We see this as the fear is such a barrier to enter private practice. We've talked to so many clinicians just in the research of putting this together, and clinicians at every part of the journey that either haven't started yet or are in the middle of building it or have successfully built it. And we're constantly collecting data for what are these things that you struggle with and how can we fix them. And the biggest one, the overarching thing, is that this is scary because there's not a ton of information. Everyone says, it depends is an often answer. And that was my experience when I went to talk to clinicians about opening private practice, because that's what you had to do. You had to piecemeal it together, all of this information. I would get this, well, it depends. And it has become fingernails on a chalkboard to me and what my heart is set on fixing, because I hate that. I hate that ambiguity. It's so ambiguous. It depends on what? What does it depend on?
Yeah.
And
it's fine to say it depends as long as you follow it up with
right. And I think
an explanation of the landscape, which,
right.
But if it's just it depends and that's it, then
yeah,
that's pretty disheartening.
And that's what I was getting. It depends on what you do. Well, okay.
Let me throw out a theory of that, a hypothesis. I think a lot of people, clinicians, since we don't really have, when we run into a legal question of, is it illegal to this or that?
Right.
Well, most of us understand that there are lawyers, and you can say, well, maybe we should ask a lawyer.
Right.
But when it comes to questions of opening a private practice, we haven't traditionally had that professional, that resource that we would say, well, maybe we should check with them.
Right.
So these supervisors who are supposed to know, they're considered and can maybe even consider themselves to be kind of the top experts in the topic of how to open a practice. But most of us, they just sort of piece together their knowledge based on experience and anecdote and memory and, misinformation potentially. Right. And so I'm guessing they say it depends because they don't really know the answer and they don't want to make a mistake. And so, but they also don't know, they feel bad just saying, I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't even know who you should go to.
Right.
Because there hasn't really been resources like this in the past.
Mm-hmm. So that's what we set out to fix.
So let me ask you a few questions. PLC or LLC?
Oh, PLLC.
Why?
Because when you are using a license to conduct a service, you have to have a P at the beginning. It has to be a personal limited liability company.
Why is that, though?
It's a different...
It depends?
It does not depend. That's a very hard and fast one. It limits they can't come after your personal assets.
Right. I mean, the way I've explained it, and you know more than I do, is that in an LLC, it's common for it to be like an organization where there's more than one person.
Right.
And so the way I explained it, and I don't know if this is right, and if you know or people out there know, let me know, but this is just, I'm only 3% sure that this is accurate, is that if you have a restaurant and you have an LLC and you're just Gransberry's Grandberries.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
The employee could make a mistake, even though you trained her really well.
Yeah.
She could make this mistake, poison a customer. And the limited liability means that you, as the owner, aren't. They're not going to take away your house. Mm-hmm. They might sue your business for whatever, and they might even sue the person who poisoned that person and say you were negligent. You were even though you were working at work, you were personally negligent. You went against your training, and we're going to sue you. Whereas in a PLC, for you and me, it's just we are not only the owner, but we're also the one providing the service.
Correct. And because you hold the license. That's what it's tied to. So in the same way that a lawyer is a PLLC, it's because it's their license. Their license is personally tied to them. Right.
That's the explanation?
Yeah. So it's
because I noticed my dentist has a PLC.
That's because they operate with their license.
Right.
Their dentistry license.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Other questions that I got yesterday. Should you have a practice with your name, like Kirk Honda Therapy, or should it be like, wind chime therapy?
We have a YouTube video on that. Go to our YouTube channel.
What's it called? Open Your Practice YouTube?
Yeah. If you Google Open Your Practice on YouTube, it'll come up. The channel will come up. So I love this question because this is where like my husband's marketing and branding experience really shines. And there are some people that just name their practice, Kirk Honda Therapy. Or I don't know what the name of yours. I don't even think yours has it. You've been doing this so long. But if someone were to start anew, let's say, today, I would encourage them to choose something that is recognizable for the service that they are trying to provide. So, for example, when we just settled on the name of my practice as Family Stability Counseling, Dustin sat down with me and we go through this in our course, it's like a thought exercise. He sat down with me and he said, how do you want what are the main things people come to you for? And I'm a family therapist. They come to me with family issues, whether it's individual counseling or a family comes to me, they come with those struggles. He says, okay, how do you want them? What's the goal? How do you want them to feel at the end? When you are fast forwarding to the end of therapy, what has been accomplished? And I said, well, my hope for them is that we've created a stable family system, that they've taken their chaos and we've worked on it, and they have achieved a level of stability that feels solid and comfortable and achievable on a daily basis without my intervention. So as we did this and put these words down on pages, we developed the Family Stability Counseling brand, essentially, or title for my practice, so that anybody that is looking for me and looking for a therapist says, oh, family stability, that's what I'm looking for. I need help creating a more stable family system.
Yeah.
So the name of my practice tells people what I specialize in and what I do.
What would be an example of an individual therapist name? Because family therapy, I imagine, lends itself to those kinds of names. Just off the top of my head, I'm having a hard time coming up with an individual, because for individuals, it's like, well, like, what do I do generally speaking? Like stable individuals. No, that doesn't that's a little funny. Like happy individuals, or happy life therapy, or
it could be, you sort of have to ask yourself what your hopes as a therapist are for your clients. That you like, are there through lines for when your clients are getting to the point of termination? What have they achieved? What have you helped them get? Where have you helped them get to? Is it a, if you are a couples counselor and you do marriage counseling, there's could be some kind of couple stability, or keep landing on that word stability because it's in my thing, but how do you want them to feel at the end of it?
Couldn't you also do like neighborhoods, like Laurelhurst counseling or something? You
could.
So that
it just
people
doesn't,
in that neighborhood,
100% people in the neighborhood would oh, that's near me, but that doesn't really tell people what you do. Like if you have a specialty or a niche, it's got to go in the title of your practice.
That's why you wouldn't recommend just having your name, because it doesn't say anything,
right?
Unless your name happens to be Stable Family. I guess you could change your name.
I'm not changing my name. I've done that once. It's a lot of work.
Dr. Stable.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Like your Antioch email still has your old name.
I know. It's a slow transition.
Jen's has been old a long time.
I know.
So Antioch, we have this internal email system, and for whatever reason, and people get married or divorced and they change their names, and it's impossible to change our Antioch email to reflect that.
And it's been L. Matthews since I was a student.
Right.
That was my student when I went there.
Yeah.
So how am I going to change that? I can't change that.
Like people don't ever change their names, do they?
Yeah.
Should you have a business bank account?
100%. And you should have at least,
It's funny because all the things you're trying to do, I don't do.
Really?
Yeah. I don't have a business bank account. I don't have a business phone. I don't have a business phone number. Right, I don't have a business email. I don't have any of that stuff. I mean, part of it is that I am set in my ways.
Yeah.
And email existed after I started my practice.
Right.
I don't even think they had banks back then. Just joking. And I'm also the sort of person who, and maybe it would, your training could allow for this. I hate clutter, and so I'm really averse to clutter, like really averse.
Yeah.
And like I hate the fact that I have 2 email addresses, that I have the Antioch and my personal email. I hate having to check 2 different email accounts.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. I wish I could just have it be one.
Yeah.
Like I have an email for the podcast, but it just funnels to my personal email.
Yeah.
And every day I get my email inbox down to 0.
Yeah.
Like,
I do too.
Okay.
I clutter in my email inbox and on my phone. So the little, I have iPhone. So
Yeah.
the little red
Right.
thing in the corner that says you have 3 emails or you
Yeah.
have 2 voicemails. Like I cannot stand
Yeah.
that little red dot.
It's like a little,
It's got to be 0.
yeah. It's like a dust bunny just sitting on the couch,
Right. And sometimes I look at other people's phones and the number's like 152.
Oh, no. Get this.
I lose my mind.
No. Get this. Feel my pain on this
Okay.
one. My wife, 65,000.
Stop.
No joke.
How?
I don't
She's
know.
subscribed to a ton of stuff and doesn't unsubscribe. Has to be.
Well, her iPhone feed, her email is, she has several emails that feed into that one thing.
Yeah.
And one of them is like a email she doesn't use.
Yeah.
But even still, like if I saw that, I would either burn my phone
Yeah.
or I would
Yeah, that
figure
would
out a
drive
way
me
to
nuts.
anyway. And so every time it's grown over the years. And so every once in a while I just look at her phone. Oh, it's up to 65,000 now. Wow. And she's just like,
I'm getting anxiety thinking about that.
Right?
That's crazy. Yeah.
now, if I email her at her email address that she only shares to certain people, she
Yeah.
gets right back to me.
Sure.
But anyway, yeah. So yeah, but having said that, I do think it's a good idea for people to kind of set it right, because like I'm actually getting into a situation right now with with my practice. It was fairly easy because the revenue stream to my bank account was, especially when I was only doing private practice, was entirely private practice stuff. So every deposit, every transaction was related to my practice pretty much. But now that I'm doing the podcast and we have like all these random expenses, and I'm writing $2,500 checks for scholarships to people, and it's all out of my private account, my private bank account, and
You're like a CPA's nightmare.
right. And so when I get to, but I do it myself.
Right.
So when I get to my taxes next year, I have like a plan. I'm going to go line by line through my personal account and like figure it out, which of course, if it was a business account, it'd be easier. So for people out there,
Don't do that.
yeah. The other thing I'll say is that back in the day, at least the kind of common way it was in Seattle, therapists didn't really invest in marketing online service because they didn't exist.
Well, it's been a really big change since, with the internet, like everything else, and marketing on the internet and
you got to pay for that, and you got to have a subscription to, Psychology Today or Open Practice or whatever that thing is, and there's all these like random expenses that kind of pile up, and so whereas back when I was starting out, there was nothing pretty much, and so I could absolutely see why it would be important for people to have that, to make it easier.
We actually
come tax
recommend
day.
4 bank accounts.
Okay.
One, and we go through this in our course, it's like a cash flow management system where everything flows into one main account, and then you have an account for taxes, you have an account for business savings. So if things come up and expenses that are not anticipated, like you have to move your office or maybe upgrade some things in your office, like you have a savings account for your business, and then you have a business profit account. So things that where you pay yourself, and those are the profits that your business has coming in. It's a way to. So you're not spending money that needs to go to taxes,
which is great.
Yeah.
But the business saving account you still have to count that as income though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
It's
just
still considered profit to the government.
correct. But
Yeah.
it's a way to
Sort of delineate for yourself
Yeah.
of like, I need to hold this aside.
it's good banking hygiene is a good way to look at that.
The thing I like to tell students for two reasons is that I will say, because I did working choices. You did working choices
For a brief minute.
brief minute, yeah. Is there's this long story short, when you're in private practice, regardless of the sort of gig you're in, you often don't necessarily get paid right away. So if you're billing insurance, for example, and you might provide a service in 1 month and get paid for it 3 or 4 months later, maybe even 6 months later, depending on the sort of situation you're in. Obviously, if you're doing private pay, then you're getting paid right away, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. And so I would, over the years, have times when things would kind of dry up. And, during the 2008,
I remember that.
it was, I was down to 2 clients on my, during, in the week, and then it snowed and no one
Didn't you
could
go like a month without seeing a client or something?
No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
It was
Sparse.
several months of me worrying about me potentially having to move back home.
Right.
And which was weird. I would have been 36 at the time or something, and just thinking like, I'm going to have to move back in with my parents. Like,
Yeah.
that's just bizarre to
Right.
think about. But it was definitely something I was considering. And I mean, I was considering going back to work at an agency and stuff. And anyway, and what I tell students is you're going to have times like that. There's going to be a downturn in the economy, or just for whatever reason, your practice is going to have a lull, just randomly. And it happens, and people think like, oh, it happens over the summer, and it's like, no, there's not really
always, yeah.
And Christmas time, not always. Sometimes it just kind of depends on the
Christmas
clientele.
time is my busiest season. Does that?
Christmas?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Family holidays.
Yeah.
I'm a family counselor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go.
My office explodes at Christmas time.
Yeah. You could raise your rates. You could have like an Uber. What do they call it? What do they call it? The peak hours.
Oh yeah. I charge more during the holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I say is that you need to keep about $10,000 of
Yeah.
cash like on hand.
Right.
And I
And
say,
you build that over time. It's
Yeah.
not like you enter.
Right.
The account will start at zero.
But as soon as you
Then
can,
as soon as you can, you start pouring money into that and building it. Yeah.
You can't. The old days when you would get a paycheck and you had a salary job, you could depend on the paycheck for the most part.
Right.
And if your bank account went down to zero, you were 99% sure you're going to get a paycheck in 2 weeks and everything would be fine.
Right.
When you're in business for yourself, you cannot guarantee that, and
Right.
there's going to be ups and downs. And so, for example, when I had those months of me, having revenue problems, I probably had a cushion of $15,000, and that just drained down to like $200 or something.
Right.
And then my practice picked up again, thank God. And I didn't have to move back in with my parents. But that would have been a funny chapter to move back in with my parents. My parents are lovely people. And so I say that for two reasons. One is for the obvious, advice, but also I always get these open mouths shock that,
Right.
wait, you can earn that much money in
Yes.
private practice, that you could have $15,000 cash in your bank account just sitting there, and you can pay the rest of your bills. And I'm like, yeah, like being in private practice, you can make good money.
Right.
I mean, you're not like, I don't know, who are we supposed to say? Donald Trump? I don't know. But you're making a professional living.
Yes.
You have to pay your taxes, you have to pay your rent, you have to, blah, blah, blah.
Business expenses. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's because therapists, when they start out, they're interns and
And they're working for free.
they're working for free,
Yes.
and they feel like a fraud, and they're like, no one's ever going to pay me for this.
Yeah.
I don't deserve to be paid.
Right.
I'm just and some of them might have never even really had a job because they went right into school, and so they've never had that sort of professional life and professional wage, and so I want to tell people out there, like, this is available to you
Right.
if you want to go for it. You have to do things to get it, but it's absolutely available. So anyway, what's another tip there, Laura?
Since you were just talking about how the money piece, right? I think that's the biggest fear for people around how quickly can I scale, and what is a full private practice, and how much can I, there's a lot of fear about I'm losing a job paycheck. Sometimes if they're going in right after graduation, maybe they're not currently working at an agency, but if they are working at an agency, that paycheck's going to go away. And then how do I replace it? And for a lot of the data that we're collecting from clinicians is if you are diligent about building your private practice and you have resources like the ones we're offering, you can do this in a year. I mean, this is very tangible to build and scale to full-time and feel very comfortable, and like you're building this savings account that we were just talking about. And I say a year, most clinicians say that they do it in under a year, which is great data. That's data that people, I didn't have that when I was first starting out.
Full-time,
I got the it depends answer.
Full-time, like 20 to 30 clients a week.
Billable hours. So we talk about that in our class too. Billable hours are different than your client caseload. But yeah, most people would consider 20 hours a week a full-time private practice.
Yeah. And for people who aren't clinicians out there, 20 billable hours equals 40 to 50 hours a week.
Correct.
Of actual work.
How
do people get clients?
You have to market yourself. You have to tell people, you asked for another tip. This is the other tip. You have to tell people what you do. And I think this is the hardest part for clinicians. We've signed up for a lifetime of sitting in a room by ourselves with people and just listening to their story. Most clinicians that I talk to are introverts at heart. They're the ones that are standing in the corner of the room at a party talking to one person because that's where we're comfortable. And it's super out of our comfort zone to walk up to somebody at a conference and say, hey, I'm Laura. This is, tell me about your practice. What do you do? This is what I do. And that's marketing at the very basic level.
That's a big ask though, right? To ask a introverted person or a person who's not the sort of person who would walk up to a rando and say that. Mm-hmm. That's a big ask to ask of them, right?
It is a big ask, but it's also an important one. We encourage our clients to challenge themselves all the time. So I'm going to encourage all of my fellow therapist friends to challenge themselves as well. It's something that I think builds your community around you. And there's a few things in this, like, yes, we are offering a course here. We're offering a product. But the real goal here is to create a community. We want to create a community of therapists that lean on each other, that are connected via social media to us and each other, that have a place to go that you're talking about. Like, who is the thought leader in this area? Like, who do you go to ask these questions? I don't know. Let's create that. Let's cultivate that community, and lean into that, because I think it's an important spot for clinicians to. It's an important thing for clinicians to have a spot that they can go to and feel like they're not isolated.
Yeah, and I think that with the internet, and particularly with Facebook, actually, that's kind of emerging, mm-hmm. is that I will recommend to people, more so in the past few years, really, that if you want to be a part of a community of therapists and you want to get advice, you want to read about other people's problems mm-hmm. with their practice and how they've solved them, Facebook is a wonderful place to go.
Yeah.
The problem with Facebook sometimes is that it's not necessarily moderated by someone who knows what they're talking about.
Right.
And so you have in fact, I was every once in a while, because I'm a part of some of these groups, mm-hmm. and I'll just take screen caps of some of the conversations that are going on there, and
right.
I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Or on Reddit, for example, these communities are great, but unless you have someone who is paid or has some incentive mm-hmm. to put themselves on the line, then you have this echo chamber of bad information.
Right.
And so,
which is frustrating, and was my experience when I started out. I was advised to go to this Facebook group and ask questions, go to this, and I would, and then I would get a slew of answers that were contradictory.
Right.
And that's how infuriating is that?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be efficient and find an answer, and I got 10 different answers.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that I'm an expert on and know absolutely the right answer, and one of them is like certain things that pertain to students, because I'm a very anal person when it comes to like the handbook and the information that's in there and the rules and how to get your license and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I would often see in these forums on Facebook would be students talking about like how to get your license, and they'd be talking amongst themselves and all this random misinformation. And especially when I was chair, I was really upset about that. And I would have to go there every once in a while.
You would send out constant emails debunking student rumors.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of that I had to do it on Facebook. Like I remember one rumor that was going around, maybe you even remember this, was that, you know, we had changed our degree from couple and family therapy, or actually,
CCFT.
no, we changed it from psychology. So we used to have a master's in psychology with a concentration in couple and family therapy, or concentration in child and couple and family therapy.
Yeah.
No, that was actually during your time. Your degree.
Oh, mine says I was on the CCFT track.
But you probably have a psychology master's.
Yes.
Right. So now it's a marriage and family therapy master's.
Correct. Yeah.
So at a certain point we changed that, and there was all this online Facebook chatter around that concern, which is fine, but rumors. And by the time I got there, they had worked themselves into this lather, and a few people were saying, students, graduates were saying things with authority, acting like they knew what they were talking about, when they absolutely had no idea what they were talking. And for people to just essentially either make stuff up and become convinced of it, or hear a rumor through, you know, a game of telephone, and misinterpret it down the line and state it as fact when they have no grounding for that. They're just like, well, I heard from a good source that, you know, from who? Well, another graduate. Well, where did they get it?
Right.
I, as chair of the program, know exactly the answer to that question.
Yes. And
so,
it's not that.
and at what point were you going to contact me?
Correct.
You know, like, and so it was really concerning, because when I would discover these rumors, I would try to debunk them, and then I would instantly wonder, how many rumors am I not
seeing,
hearing about?
Yeah.
And so having a place like what you're trying to offer, Open Your Practice, is, you know, because you're going to make money doing this, right? And you are making some money doing it.
Yeah.
And so you're incentivized to say like, okay, I need to make sure I know the real answer to these questions.
Right.
And I'm going to spend the time. I'm not just going to like off the top of my head and say it depends.
Right.
I'm going to spend a couple hours researching, figuring it out, consulting with people, good sources, gathering the information, you know, in a book, writing it down, because you're not going to remember either. You might have to flip through this stuff sometimes too. It's like, how do we do this?
I think I have that whole thing memorized,
okay.
but yeah.
And so having a source like this, you know, is great. How else could people market themselves? Because I know this is a big question for people.
So Psychology Today is by far and away your best marketing tool. And I will say that because it's your best marketing tool to the general public, where consult groups, continuing education stuff, counseling associations, meetup groups, those are your marketing tools for your colleagues. So there's two buckets there.
Kind of looping back to the other question, should the Psychology Today site have their name or their practice name, or should it be both?
It will. Mine has my name.
Your name.
And then they give you a description.
And then you can.
And my website. So basically the way it appears on Psychology Today is it's your name, and then your website will say Family Stability Counseling, and then you talk about in your profile like I'm family counselor, family stability, and it goes from there.
So that's a big one. What else can people do? Because like a lot of people they'll go on Psychology Today, and you know, they sit back and wait for clients to come, and they don't necessarily come at the pace that they need to in order to be full time in a year. You know.
Correct. So there's. Okay, let me organize my thoughts. There's the Psychology Today piece for the general public. Most people, when they search for a clinician, they say therapist in, I don't know where we are right now, North Seattle. they will be directed to the Psychology Today website without even knowing that that's what's happening. That's how people find therapists, is through Psychology Today, and they don't even really take enough time to ask what Psychology Today even is. They're just like, oh, therapist in my area, great. Like, we're so efficient and trusting of the internet that it's remarkable to me. So that's the general public side. But the other piece is, we have a YouTube video about this too. We talk about being sort of honing in on what your specialty is, if you have a specialty, a niche, if you will. There's this big argument about, do you have a niche? Do you not have a niche? And Dustin and I have put our stake in the sand that a niche is a pretty good thing, largely because it's easier to market and you become known in that community of people. So,
but what kind of niches? Because to me, if I was to think back to when I started out, I was working with couples on lots of issues, infidelity, conflict, parenting, growing old together,
right,
trauma, sexual issues. I was working with, and I liked to work with all those issues. I was working with individual adults on relationships, anxiety, depression, trauma, parenting, their relationship with their spouse. I was working with teenagers with defiance, drug use, running away from home, legal problems, their sexual issues, their trauma issues, the personality disorders, going back to individuals and couples. I was working with children, less so, but to some extent when I first started, was working with children who were dealing with adoption or attachment or anxiety or defiance, violence, school problems. And then I had these weird specialties because I'm Asian, and so I was referred a lot of Asian clients. And for some reason, there were a lot of Korean adoptees who needed therapy. They were adopted into a white American family, and the attachment disruption that the adoptee had in Korea had residue in their later years. And so I had probably like 20 Korean adoptees. There were other little specialties there too. Like if I came to you and said, okay, here's who I'm working with, and I like doing all of this stuff, what would you have told me in terms of the niche that I would market myself as? Yeah.
So just hearing your laundry list of people that you were working with, it's all relational work. It was things that you described. Even when you're working with individuals, you're working on relational stuff, which immediately delineates you from that's the first level, right?
Delineates me from what? Being an individual-minded person?
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of that conversation that we have with students when they're picking a track at our university, right? Are you going to be an LMHC or are you going to be an LMFT? Like the big difference here is how you approach problems in working with people and that mindset. So that's the first piece. And then the second level, because I had to go through this too, like my work is relational, it's family and all of these things, but I also have this eating disorder specialty, which is also relational. It fits in there. So on my website, I have, family, my description of what I do in family therapy, and also that I work with eating disorders. And you can have more than one niche. You don't have to only market yourself as an eating disorder specialty. It's really designed. The way that my brain thinks about it is if you can find that group of people. So there is an eating disorder community of clinicians in Seattle. It's small and we all know each other and we all refer to each other all the time. And that's, from a marketing standpoint, that's what you're looking for. How do I get, so if I'm defining a niche, like maybe it's attachment stuff, or I'm working with kids that have been adopted and that transition is difficult, right? There's a community of therapists in Seattle that work with that stuff, and so you want to find your tribe there,
right?
And tell them where you are and what you do,
right? So, I think is attainable to people who have, say, 15 niches, right? Because you can So say, for example, I really liked working with Korean adoptees or adoptees in general. I would find, even though it was only like 3% of my caseload, I just found it interesting and wanted more of those kinds of clients and felt competent with that. I would find that community and I would say, among other things, I'm specializing in this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I would find a group of couple therapists, and I would find a group of individual therapists who work with relational issues or that sort of thing.
Yep. That's
what your advice is.
Yeah.
But in terms of marketing yourself, I would have 15 niches on my Psychology Today.
Well, and I think you can on Psychology Today. You have this list of things that you treat, right? Essentially, the specialties, you can have like 15 things on that list. They don't really limit you. They encourage you to keep it smaller so that people, have a better idea of what it is that you do. But they don't limit you to, you can have 15 things that you're interested in treating in your practice, and that's totally fine.
But in terms of the overall debate regarding whether you can or should, what's more effective, to market yourself as like, look, I'm a
generalist.
I'm a therapist who works with individuals, couples, and families. And there's some things I don't treat, like I don't work with schizophrenia, and I don't work with bipolar, and I don't work with this and that, but I work with a lot of different things. And that's how you market yourself, as opposed to saying I work with eating disorders, or I work with couples to resolve their issues, or I work with families. What's your advice regarding those? Is one more effective marketing than the other one?
Maybe I'm not understanding so what's the root of your question? One more time.
Is it more effective to market the way I did, which is to say, in general, the way you advise people? As I didn't say I specialized in anything.
Right.
I said I'm a therapist. I didn't say I was a generalist. I just said I'm a therapist.
Right.
And if someone came to me that I didn't want to work with or it wasn't really in my area, I would refer them.
Right.
And I think I did that. I don't remember my justification, but I did that because I wanted to be open to a lot of different kinds of referrals. Obviously, if I focused on one particular niche, then those people would be more confident in the fact that I would be able to treat them. And the general advice today is to pick a niche. That's what all the articles are writing. You got to pick a niche and do that. And when my supervisees ask me, I'm always like, if you want to, great. But I never did that, and I felt like I did fine. Yeah. And I have supervisees who don't, and I feel like they do okay.
I think that there's room here. It's not a hard and fast, you must pick a niche, whatever you want to say.
I think it's both.
Tomato. You must pick one in order to be successful. Like, that's not what we're saying. I would actually, any article that came out that said that's you're not going to be successful unless you have a niche, like, I would argue that's not true.
But if you have a niche,
it's helpful in some areas.
Yeah.
And I would say one of those areas, because you initially asked about marketing, is marketing. Because you know what to say to the general public about what you do, and you know what to say to your colleagues about what you do.
Right. And anecdotally, with my supervisees, I've found success. Like, I had a supervisee who only wanted to work with couples. And so that's all she did. And she marketed herself on that niche, and she got a lot of couples, because if you're looking for a therapist and you see 10 therapists and 9 are generalists and one says all I do is couples, then it's sort of like, if I have a problem with my foot and I have 10 physicians and there's 9 are generalists and one says I specialize in feet, then I'm much more likely to go to the foot person.
Yeah.
But the downside is that if you want to work with other sorts of people,
right.
I guess it's just really convenient if you happen to be very interested in one particular thing.
Right. And I will say, as someone who does have a couple of specialties up on my website, I do, it's not that I only have families in my practice, or that I only have families and I only have eating disorders. Like, I see individuals as well for other things, that maybe they came to me with their own family of origin stuff, but we work on other things in their lives too. It's not, I still have what I feel to be a very well-rounded practice, even though I have this specialty that I advertise for. So, and a lot of that can be sussed out too in that initial phone call when they call you like, hey, I see that you specialize in family. I'm actually, having trouble with this, and it might be rooted to my family, but I don't really know. And then we have a conversation about, am I the best fit for you?
Right.
It's that kind of thing.
So in terms of marketing and putting yourself out there and saying, look, this is who I am, this is what I do, and being that extroverted self-marketer, what specifically with the venues though, because obviously you have Psychology Today, you have, I guess, just random encounters with people at conventions or trainings or just even at a party or something, just like, oh, just by the way, I just want to let you know I'm building a business. If you know anyone who needs any help with this, here's my card. But where else specifically? Because I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah. Again, this is going to be a tougher question to answer for people that are generalists. But if you have, since we are having the niche discussion, I can speak from my experience because I have this eating disorder specialty. There are other places in the community where people go for resources. So in the eating disorder community, there's all these levels of care, right? From the hospital all the way, to residential treatment, to intensive outpatient, and then to outpatient private practice level of care. So you connect with those levels of care and tell them, again, this is all what this really boils down to, the marketing piece boils down to, is people have to know where you are, that you are there, and what you do.
So you're telling other clinicians like the Emily Project and these places, and you're saying, but how? Because I feel like people are like, well, I emailed them, and I'm like, you probably need to go there like every month and bring them donuts or something.
So part of
at an eating disorder place, is that all right to bring donuts to an eating disorder place?
Most people would say like, oh my gosh, I would never do that, but I would argue, yeah. I think that's an interesting concept. Anyway, so to get back to what we were saying, you have to sort of maintain you're building a relationship, and this is where I think you can really take the fear out of the marketing, because you say marketing to clinicians and they're like, well, I don't want to sell myself, right? You're not selling yourself. You're building a relationship. You're building a resource for people. You are a resource. There are so many people in search of mental health services at any given point in time, and they aren't going to refer to you if they don't know you're there. You have to make yourself available as a resource.
Yeah.
So if you're in a rural town and you treat depression and anxiety, doctors want to know where to refer their patients that come to them for depression and anxiety.
Yeah, that's a great reframe, if you will, of like, you're not marketing yourself, you're actually doing them a favor.
Yeah.
Maybe like half to a third of the people are going to be like, okay, whatever. But as long as you're not bothering them, they're not going to like be that upset. But at least half or more are going to be thankful so much that they finally have someone that they can actually refer to, because they get people who need such a service and they're like, I don't know, go to the yellow pages. I really I don't know where to turn.
Don't market in the yellow pages.
Does that exist?
Not a thing. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Does the phone book still exist? I don't know.
Yeah.
So internet dependent.
So, okay. So that sort of thing. What about online? Like where do you plug your practice online? Cause I'll tell you what I tell people is there's Thumbtack, which can be, I know some supervisees who have gotten clients through that. I've known supervisees who get clients on Facebook groups. People will ask for a therapist in Mill Creek who does this, and they say, oh, I'm near Mill Creek. And I
see that a lot. That happens a lot. And I think that's a great sort of budding resource again, in our community, as a way to cross-refer and help each other. Because sometimes I'll get a phone call for something that I don't treat, and I don't have that I'm constantly building my referral list, right? I'm constantly trying to refresh, and this person's practice is full. Okay, I need somebody else in that spot. So I have a referral. But when I don't have a specialty on my list for referral in a specific location, I'll go to that Facebook group in Seattle Therapists or whatever, and I'll say, hey, does somebody, I have somebody looking for this specialty, and I get responses, and then I can, go from there. I think that's an incredible tool.
Where else? I mean,
on the Facebook group, or just
marketing,
in general.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Like other ads, like other
you can't,
Google ads.
Yeah. So the Google ad, it's more of like a Google AdWords thing,
which confuses me.
I know.
Like I think I even have an account with them,
Yeah.
for Psychology in Seattle, because on my website there's like I was experimenting with this like years ago, and I inserted like a banner ad on one of our popular pages.
Yeah.
And Google AdWords, and there's like these weird pages. It's very confusing.
It's called so Google AdWords is like it's what they call pay-per-click advertising.
But why is it called AdWords?
Advertising? Oh, because it's based on the search words.
Okay.
So when somebody searches Seattle, or I don't know, are we in Northgate? Are we where?
We're in North Seattle.
North Seattle.
North Ballard. You can say.
So North Ballard therapist. When you build out your Google AdWords account, you insert search terms that you think would be most common and relate to your practice. So when people search for those things, it pulls in a search engine optimization way. SEO is what people normally call that. It pulls your website up as a response to, oh, this person's looking for this. And then if they click on your website, Google will charge your quote unquote account for that click. So you pay per click. So if they don't click, you don't get charged. So that's a way to advertise. And it's actually a way and you can set limits on it. So I only
want to pay $10 a month.
Right. So. I want to put 50. I'm just starting out. I really want to play with this and see how this works. Maybe I put $50 a month for 3 months into this thing, and these are the words that I think are, and there's a ton of analytics. You can really geek out on the analytics of
I only want people searching from this area who are male, the ages of blah blah blah.
It's more that
you can do that on Facebook.
Yeah, but it's more that you can start to see what people are searching for, and hone in that way. So like
common things related to this are let's say this phrase.
You entered 50 words that relate to your practice and the services that you offer, and 10 of those words were hot button words. Like people always clicked when they searched these terms. So then you dump all the other words that you used, and maybe you put in some more. Like you keep those 10 and then you try out some different ones, and you can really start targeting.
It's so funny because like for people listening out there that are business people, you're like, well, duh. They're like, well, of course, if you open a business, the internet and Google is your primary source for exposure and potentially paying customers. Of course, you're going to do Google AdWords, and like, you have to tell people to do this.
You do,
but for therapists, because therapists
didn't go to business school,
and they're terrified of stuff like this.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we were talking. Dustin and I were talking about this the other day about how we want people.
Is Dustin frustrated with therapists? Is he just like, what's wrong with these people?
He's kind of baffled, not frustrated. But
because in his world it's obvious.
Oh, so obvious.
Yeah.
And he said when we were first having these conversations, and he couldn't understand why I hadn't already done private practice. And when we were first starting to build mine, he was like, okay, we have to go way back to the drawing board. Like let's pull way back. Like there were just things that I didn't know.
So what kinds of personality traits do you bump up against with people that you're trying to help? You talked about taking a deep breath, and what other kinds of sort of reframes or coaching do you give people? Because I'm imagining that's a big deal, a big part of what you do.
Yeah. It's so much of it is around the fear and anxiety about this process because they don't know. And the big message that I want to give is you don't know because you weren't taught. It is not your fault.
Right.
So let's have some grace with ourselves. You didn't go to business school, and we're offering this course and the community that we're trying to build a scaffold around it. Like that's really how we look at this. Like the course is the center pillar, and we've kept it very simple and efficient on purpose. And then the community and the other offerings are built around it. So like the YouTube channel and the social media and everything is there to support it. But you weren't taught these things in business school. So this course is the business school for therapy. It's that class that you wanted in graduate school and never got.
Do you think we should offer it in graduate school?
Well, you and I have had conversations about that.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one because not everybody wants to go into private practice.
But so many do.
I know.
Especially in Seattle because the clients are there and the alternatives can be such a drastically lower salary. I mean, the standard of, or the cost of living in Seattle is one of the highest in the world.
Yeah.
And in the States. I mean, I think San Francisco and New York are higher, obviously, but Seattle's up there.
Yeah.
And the agencies are paying actually quite a lot compared to when I graduated.
Yeah.
But
it's not enough.
Not a lot. Like, I think a going rate, I think some people are being paid like $35,000.
Oh my gosh.
$35,000 a year.
That's
yeah. I mean, I
How
think
do you live?
I think you get more than that working at like a restaurant or something.
Yeah.
And so, and you have student loans and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And so that's the alternative. Now, agencies, it's not their fault.
No.
It's because politicians and voters don't allocate enough money to such things. And so, and they're trying real hard to serve everybody.
Right.
And so they're doing what they can. So if we wanted to change that situation, then it's a matter of the voters and the legislatures. But before that happens, which I doubt it ever will, honestly, people have to figure out a way to make a living, and the opportunities for making money in private practice is so much higher.
Right.
It's not uncommon for people to make $150,000 a year
Correct.
revenue pre-taxes after just a few years after graduation, if they're good at marketing and that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's a pretty big gap between $35,000 a year and $150,000.
And we really see this. We were talking about this morning before I drove up here. We see this because my brain works systemically, and it will forever. This is a systemic solution to something that is so much bigger than us. We are on the verge as a society, I would argue, really starting to address and look at the mental health impact of our societal fabric. I think over the next 10 to 20 years and even beyond that, we're really going to have to look at how we are treating ourselves, treating each other, and the consequences of those things. We are going to need therapists, and we are concerned about the mental health of mental health therapists. And one of those things is in agency work or in a job format, so not private practice, you don't get paid enough. You're saddled with debt, and with your student loan debt, most likely, and there's no way out. And the level of anxiety that comes from those pieces, and then you're trying to help other people on top of that, it's just a recipe for disaster on the brink of, addressing being able to address some really big societal issues and being able to help. And I think that the more clinicians we have in private practice, the more ready we will be able as a society to heal.
Yeah.
And I know that's kind of, meta for this thing that we're talking about here, but I that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I see it as like, the way my brain works is when I look at a wheel, whether it's a family system or relationship or whatever, I'm like, okay, and I do that analysis. I'm like, where is the most efficient and effective wedge to go into that system that's going to create the most amount of change, like, and be the most help. And I really see this, what we're building here, as part of that process.
Yeah.
And helping clinicians reclaim their lives and be able to help people in the way that they went to school for and want to. There's something really awesome and beautiful about that. So
instead of taking whatever work you can and just scraping by and stressing out, working too much, not having any space or time or capacity for some pro bono work or trying to give back to your community and not necessarily get paid for it, which most therapists want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give people an idea, for me, when I graduated, and I had kind of the normal amount of debt, it was $80,000 after my master's degree, and I was working at an agency, and just working at my agency, most of my income was going towards the interest alone on my loans. So like 60 cents of every dollar I earned was just going towards the interest.
I know it so well. It's still true.
And just to give you an idea of my extravagant lifestyle at the time, I was living off of $850 a month.
Yeah.
That included rent and gas, food, fun, going out, internet, like my phone, we didn't have cell phones back then. So
your house phone.
Yeah.
Because when you said phone just now, everybody pictured an iPhone.
Right.
Not the case.
No. It was a physical thing that plugged into the wall and had an answering machine next to it. And so I'm a businessy, spreadsheety person, and I did this, and I sort of figured it all out, and I looked at the numbers, and I was like, I'm doomed. Like in 2 years, I'll default on all these loans, and I'm asking around, and I'm working full time. I'm working 40 hours a week plus commute plus stress.
Right.
And I'm going to be bankrupt. Like, how does this make any sense?
Right.
And so I opened my practice on the weekends and the evenings. I did Working Choices. I actually taught at Antioch, which earned me less money per hour than other things. And the equation turned out to be that I needed to work 3 jobs, 60 to 70 hours a week to pull myself out of the debt. And I did that.
Yeah.
And I just got used to working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
8 to 10 hours a day. I just remember being like, and I'm not that kind of guy. I like my free time.
I do too.
Like
when can we go to the beach?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm not one of those people. I'm not a workaholic.
No,
I'm not one of those people.
Either.
Like I like to have my free time. And so it was really a freaky time for me.
Yeah.
I mean, just as a side note, I became a therapist because I was 24 and I was working as a business guy in Bellevue, and it was a 8 to 5 job, and I hated that rigidity so much that I was like, there has to be another job that is more flexible. And so I started going through my Rolodex of occupations that I knew about without any guidance or mentorship.
Yeah.
And and therapist just randomly occurred to me.
Right.
And a lot of things came together in terms of, like, I love psychology, I love people, I love talking, I love thinking, I love to read stuff, but I also thought, well, because my perception of them was that they didn't have rigid hours, which is true once you get established.
Right.
But ironically, after I graduated, I had the most rigid hours I could possibly imagine.
For a period of time, yeah.
I did pay off my debt, and then my private practice built and got built up, and then I actually was earning a salary that I could quit the agency job, and I was like, okay, now I'm only working 50 hours a week, and instead of eating top ramen, I'm eating cup of noodles. Which is
it's an upgrade.
It is. It comes with its own cup. You don't need a bowl.
Right.
So I'm not even joking.
No, I've heard this story enough times to know that you're not joking. Yeah.
It was a tough time, but
that's so relatable to the listeners here, because I just think so many people are right in that spot.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, I've graduated. I did what I was supposed to do. I went to school. I worked hard. I worked on myself, which is like, whew, that was a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
I worked on myself so that I could be a competent, ethical clinician. I did all the things. Now I'm stuck, and I'm saddled with debt, and I'm stressed out, and I'm more anxious than my clients. And what happened to my life, right? And private practice was certainly the way out for me, and for you as well, of the sort of the answer to this evergreen problem that we have going. And I think so many people are sitting right there. And the purpose of this course and building this community, and what our hopes for this are to remove the fear of that endeavor, and also to shrink the lead time. Right. So if you were to sort of piecemeal this together and fumble around and watch this YouTube video and that YouTube video, and, try to ask this clinician about this thing, that's going to take forever. And it did take me forever. So we've put it all together in 34 steps The blueprint is 34 steps, the book that we wrote, and then the course, and that's the sort of what to do, and then the course is the how to do it, which is full. It's just full of resources, and we have done all of that legwork for you. Once you get to the end of the course, you have a guide, a path, and you have minimized your build time extensively. And what we talk about in the course is that time is money. And if you can spend a month putting together all of these things in the course, instead of 6 months, you've now earned yourself 5 months of runway and income. And that makes this so much more feasible and achievable.
I'm looking through your three-ring binder here.
Yeah.
It's over 100 pages.
Yeah.
I just want to compliment you on your font choice. It's one of my
that's Dustin.
It's one of my favorite fonts.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I don't know what
hilarious.
it reminds me of the 20s kind of.
Yeah, I like it too. It's really cool.
It's very clean.
Yeah.
You lay it all out here. You have how to get paneled.
Yep.
This, different steps on. Well, so what's your advice for people with that? Like, to be paneled, to use insurance or not to use insurance? What do you say?
Such a big debate, right?
Yeah.
You will build faster if you are paneled. Period. The end. So, and that's, I think, the big choice that you have to make.
Yeah.
You have to decide your ramp time, your build time, and what's important to you. The downsides of being paneled with an insurance company are you are sort of handcuffed to their contracted rate. Mm-hmm. That's something that graduates don't often know, is that all insurance companies pay something different. And so if you are paneled with a variety of insurance companies, you will be paid differently from each insurance company for the hour of service. And then you don't get paid on the day that you provide the service. You have to do the billing.
Well, you get a copay, but not much.
Well, yeah, but that's
like $20.
Yes, $20.
Yeah.
The majority of your paycheck will come in a bulk statement from the insurance company, sometimes 60 days from the date of service.
Yeah.
So that's a headache for people that they don't want sometimes,
Yeah.
So they're, I'm just going to do private pay. It's a
Yeah, when I started out, I don't know who advised me, but I was full on insurance person. I tried to be paneled on everything. Mm-hmm. I was paneled on, I still am paneled on Primera.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is because I just feel bad charging my clients $150 a session.
Right.
When with Primera, they will pay about $116 or something per session, which, it's a pay cut, but it's not that bad, know. But at the height of because I haven't had a full-time practice in 10 years, but back then when I did, I was paneled with Cigna, which paid very low, but it was, $60 a session, which isn't like working at an agency. Mm-hmm. And as long as I only had, 3 or 4 of Cigna people, then it was fine. It all just kind of worked its way out in the wash. You know, I had Primera people, Regents people, I got rid of United because they screwed me over so many times. Long story short on that, but so I mean, I get it. I guess but I have supervisees right now who can't take insurance yet because they're
associates,
and they have full-time practices.
Yes.
So it's like, well, I guess if the demand is out there and people are willing to see you, then I guess why would you use insurance?
Right.
But I guess if you're having trouble getting the clients, then being paneled is absolutely the way to go because one, the insurance, when they get calls, will just give you their name, give the clients your name, and the clients are much more likely to stay for a long time because they only have to pay $20 per session.
Right. And it's also, if you're really leaning on psychology today to do the majority of your quote unquote marketing, that's where, so psychology has the feature where the person logs in and says, I want somebody in my zip code that takes my insurance.
Right.
And then it filters it.
Right.
So if they have Primera and they're looking in North Ballard, you're going to come up on their list, right? So that's another reason to be sort of linked to an insurance company, is because a lot of people search for clinicians by insurance.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, I always just wanted to see people long term, and it's just so, and weekly, and to pay me $600 a month when all I have to do is be on a panel and yeah, I get a pay cut to maybe say $500 a month, but I get to actually get into it with these people weekly, sometimes for years and years and years. I don't know. I found that to be okay for me.
It's really, and this is something we go through in this course. We take you through a lot of thought exercises, is what I call them. Like, you have to be intentional about this in order for it to work, and in order for you to build something that you like. Here's the other thing too, is that you don't want to build a private practice that you hate. If you really don't want to take insurance and you don't want to deal with that headache, that's a choice you have to make, and be honest with yourself about that.
But don't you find that a lot of people, because you use insurance, that a lot of people think it's a bigger headache than it is?
Yes, and
because I found it to be incredibly easy.
Yeah, and you were probably back then submitting insurance claims on paper.
Primera still allows me to do that.
You still do insurance?
Yeah.
Kirk, oh my gosh. You're so inefficient. Okay, so
no, I have done to a science. So I have a form that because I don't use the
CMS 1500.
Yeah, I have my own Word document, and it's just my own little stupid Word document. Okay. And I just take the last claim and I erase the dates. Okay. And I just enter a new dates, print it out. It takes me 2 minutes. Okay. I have a whole system.
So you have a system.
Yeah,
that's good.
I have a stamp with my address on it.
Well, there you go.
And yeah. Eventually, Regents at all of them, and they all ended up going online, of course, because that's stupid that I just find it funny that, like, I send this claim in and there's some employee at Primera that still has to open my envelope.
So angry with you that you still do it
up and has to enter because they have to enter it into a computer.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah,
yes.
but I don't. Do you use Regents at all?
Yeah.
You know that claim internet's what is it called? Like it's how you submit claims to Regents.
Oh, Availity?
Yeah, Availity. Yeah. God, you have to change your password every 3 weeks or something to something you've never used before. So drives me crazy.
So here's how I'm going to highlight an inefficiency for you, because I'm an efficiency
Well, I stopped
fanatic.
using Regents altogether, but anyway.
But if you use a digital practice management solution like Simple Practice or
Which you have to pay for.
You do. It's a monthly, but it is the amount, and we talk about this in our course, it's the biggest workhorse of my practice. I will pay them $49.99 a month till the day I die, because it does so much for me.
Does the claims for you too?
It does the insurance billing. It holds all of my disclosure statement. Everything electronically is digitally signed. All of my charting, all of my scheduling.
Because they figure out how to link with all the
and it's all HIPAA compliant, and they save it for 7 years.
And you never have to line in. You never have to log into Availity. Yeah.
No, never.
Yeah.
Because it's all centralized.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm a dinosaur.
That's my point here. Is that we have curated the resources for everyone in this course, and people often, some people have said, like, what's the difference between this blueprint book, essentially the 34 item checklist, and the course? The big difference is how we dive into the resources that are available. So in the blueprint is the what to do, like, oh, you have to build a website, and we talk a little bit about that. But in the course, we talk about how to do that, because people told me that starting out, like, oh, you have to build a website. And I was like, oh my God, do you have any idea what kind of cavernous black hole that actually is? It's unreal, right? But if you have a guide, it's so much easier. Like these are the top website companies to use.
Who do you recommend?
Wix is the top one. We've used it to build several things, and it's just so intuitive, and their customer service is on point.
It's similar to Squarespace.
Squarespace is another one, yeah.
And you pay like a yearly subscription.
And they'll do your they'll integrate your email, they'll integrate your domain name, like they do it all for you. Okay. And then,
what if people wanted to just not have a paid for month, a yearly? Is there an option like that?
What do you mean by paid
like
for
where
yearly?
you don't want to, where you want to have a website that you just pay one fee for? Is something like that?
Well,
exist?
they often have like different payment plans, so you can either pay monthly or you can just pay it yearly. Okay. And it's again, to be able to have a presence on the internet and have a website, which I know you don't have.
I do. I mean,
you have a website?
Well, my podcast has a website.
Oh, no, I'm talking about for your therapy practice.
And on my podcast website, there's a page just for my practice, but it's basically just my resume.
Right. See, you're so ancient. Okay. So if you want to have a presence on the internet, it's a nominal fee to be able to link it to things like Psychology Today and put it on your business card. Like,
right.
I will pay that $100 a year all day.
In the HIPAA law, there was a line in there that I remember being like, like this is something that isn't talked about enough, is that our disclosure statement and all of our, confidentiality policies have to be available on the internet at any time. Like, people need to access that. So you can't. So the obvious way to do that, and I think what HIPAA was thinking about at the time when it was written, is like, well, because HIPAA's mainly for hospitals and these big organizations. Obviously, a hospital is going to have a website, and so the Swedish medical needs to have their policies posted on their website. But it doesn't. What they weren't thinking of was like, what about the thousands of private practice people who don't necessarily have a website to begin with? They don't really need one. So in a way, it could potentially be illegal not to have a website, because you need to have those documents available.
Right.
Like, if your client or a prospective client wants to just look you up or a current client just wants to be like, ooh, what was that thing about confidentiality? Boom. They need to be able to access that right away. They shouldn't have to call you and all that kind of thing.
Right.
And so that's what I say to people. I was just like, if you're resisting the website thing, it could potentially be a legal issue. Not that it's likely you're going to be.
Right. It's a best practice thing for me, just in general. Why wouldn't you want people to know who you are and what you do?
But some people are like, well, I have one. It's my Psychology Today page. They consider that to be kind of their website. Yeah.
And I can see that. I want more for people. I think that
because it's such a limited page,
and you build it once. That's the thing. And I think the reason people don't build it is because it's cumbersome and they don't know how, and they don't know how to write the copy, and they don't know how to do all these things. Well, we fixed that for you. We tell you how.
Right.
We give you the resources. We give you a resource for, a lot of people don't know this. They just Google like therapy pictures online, and then they put those pictures on their website. Well, now you're into copyright infringement because you're using a photo that isn't, so we have a resource for free photos that you don't have to worry about the copyright infringement piece of it. Like, we've thought of all of that.
What about people who like want to start a podcast or a blog or something, like their own, like, one of the things that I've been trying to push people to do more of is to, if you want to, have a Facebook page or an Instagram or a podcast or a blog or some kind of thing that you're out there spreading the word of various different, spreading good messages, around like, here's a tip on relationships, here's a tip on parenting, here's a tip on this, or inspirational things. The internet has a lot of voices. Some of them can be very destructive, and we generally have positive voices, helpful, scientifically verified voices, and we can do a lot of good for society by being a part of that conversation. Do you talk about that with people? About having a Facebook page? Social media piece? About being a presence on the internet, actually pushing, trying to be, for lack of a better word, like internet famous on some level, in a pocket of trying to get followers on Instagram, trying to get followers on Twitter. Yeah, we talk a bit about social media in general. I think there's some things you have to know about confidentiality and those types of things. But the more places, the way the internet is going is the more places that you are present, the more opportunities there are for people to find you, and the more opportunity there is for you to help people, right? So if you've got, a therapy practice and you are super passionate about yoga therapy and mindfulness or whatever, and you have you incorporate that into your Instagram feed, I think that's a great thing. I think there's people that follow you that know somebody in their life that might benefit from that type of service, or like, that's the way our society is going. It's just like that interconnectedness. Right. It's crazy. So if people want to find you, they go to openyourpractice.com.
Yep, openyourpractice.com/access. So you can get that newsletter. And then I also wanted to say we are having a free webinar. The webinar is called Starting a Therapy Practice. And
Is it on your website or on YouTube?
The webinar will be, so you sign up for the newsletter. So you go to openyourpractice.com/access and you plug in your email address, and then we'll send everybody on that email list the link.
Okay.
So sign up for that. Starting a Therapy Practice. I don't know why it's not on here.
And you do courses in person, and you're also going to do courses online.
So we have moved to online.
Oh.
So it's, because the feedback was, we got so many, there were people that came to those live events, which was fantastic. And the testimonials we got from it were overwhelmingly wonderful. But we also got a ton of emails from people saying, I can't make it this weekend. Can you do it next weekend? And I'm like, no. I would love to. I'd love to do this every weekend and do it all over the country and make it available for everybody. But I need to stay sane. And so, just like how, so we that's how this evolved, is we set out to solve that problem of how can we make this available for people at any time.
Yeah.
So we've moved to this sort of digital, the course is offered online. You get this 3-ring binder in the mail and the access link to the, webinar.
Yeah. So I guess last time when we talked, I had a premonition or a prediction of, what you were getting into, and I'll have another one for you.
Okay.
Is that if you want to, you could be, a major voice on the internet for just general practice content. Obviously, I think that's where you're going with your YouTube channel. Because if you're going to have a podcast and a YouTube channel, you could run through all your material in a certain amount of time, and then you run out of that material. And it's like, okay, well, now what? I could envision you getting experts like lawyers or, ethics experts or, marketing people or, some marketing exec at an advertising company on your YouTube channel or your newsletter or whatever, providing little tips and insights. You could get a tech person who knows how to do this and that, just all these experts that are relevant to how to have a business in psychotherapy. Maybe even like clients who would come on and talk about, like, I like this kind of office, or I like these kinds of chairs.
Right. We talk about chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's a big choice, right?
It is.
Because there's so many.
It matters.
There's so many different kinds of chairs. Well, what's your advice on chairs?
Because, okay, I have this is a very big deal for me. My office chair is the most expensive piece of furniture that I think I've ever purchased.
How much was it?
$800.
It's just one chair.
Was it $800? I think it might have been on sale. Oh, Macy's. I just went, but it's cushy. It has lumbar support. I think it even reclines, although I never recline it.
So it's your chair that you sit in.
That I sit in, because when I set out so I sublet an office first, as most people might, and we talk about that in the course and the YouTube videos and stuff. Like, you might start out that way, and the chair that I was sitting in was okay, but it wasn't great. And there are some days where I see 7 clients in a day. I'm sitting in that chair for 7 hours, and it matters. It matters for, I can't sit there and, people that know me know I recently had a baby, and when I was deep into pregnancy and really uncomfortable already, it was awesome to sit in a chair that was comfortable and great.
Yeah, it's funny. My therapist was pregnant and, gave birth to like her second or third child while I was seeing her.
Yeah.
And just as a side note, like, I would see her, I could tell she was uncomfortable at times, just being, she was small like you and just giant, pregnancy.
Yeah.
And she would also get a little bit more sleepy than usual.
Yes.
Okay, so there's your chair is your chair kind of like a chair that would be in a living room, kind of like one of those plushy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
because sometimes it's like office-y chairs. This is the chair I use. I talk about this sometimes. This chair looks like it's not very comfortable, but it's actually extremely comfortable for me. And I bought this at a secondhand store on Mercer Island, like at the Jewish community center. And
awesome.
It was like really beat up and old. Like, for those who don't know, it's kind of like an old timey office chair. There's no rollers on the bottom.
Right.
It's just like a regular chair you might see like in a den somewhere of like a professor or something, and it's leather and it has wood armrests. And I bought it kind of on a whim, thought, well, and it was starting to fall apart, and I actually paid to have it reupholstered because I went around looking for.
And you sat in a bunch, didn't you?
I sat in a bunch.
Big thing. You got to sit in it.
Yeah, and tried all these different chairs because I was like, surely this random chair I've been using for therapy cannot be the best chair out there. And I tried all these different chairs, like with the lumbar support and the ones where it's like mesh, so your butt breathes a little bit more, and in both directions if you need it to be. I just nothing compared to this chair, and I was like, I guess this is my chair.
What it was for me, I was looking for one. I've noticed that when I'm processing something that a client says, I will put my head back and like lean my head. Like I'll be like, like sort of like I'm staring up into space, like processing what they said to like collect my thoughts. And I sat in so many chairs, and I would do that. I would like put my head back and I would like fall backwards, and I'm like, no, that's not it.
So you need a chair that
it's got like kind of a high enough back to where when I just like angle my head back just enough, like it catches it. But that was important to me. Like these are things you have to think about.
What about client couches and whatnot?
Yeah, I had to have a big couch. I see families, and that's, if you're gonna just see couples, get a love seat. That's totally fine. But if you're going to see more than one or two people in the room, you have to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the only sort of reference I have for that preference or that choice is as a client sitting in various different couches over the years, or in supervision in someone's private office. And therapists have wildly varying styles. Like, I had a supervisor who had a couch that was and he was a very rigid psychologist guy. Yeah. But his couch was so amorphous that within 5 minutes, I would basically be laying down, because it was one of those couches with very amorphous cushions that were very slidey, and I didn't like that couch because I would want to sit up, but I really couldn't. Yeah. I
think you're looking for medium across the board, right? Like medium softness, medium aesthetic. Like you're not looking for something in yellow patent leather, right? Like you're looking, like it should be neutral, and not that your clients are going to sink into it, but you also don't want it so firm that they're like, you're just looking for like a middle of the road couch. Okay. Like that's what I would say. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, Laura. Anything
I did
else?
find the date for this webinar. It is October 19th at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So it's about a month from now. Just
2019, depending on...
Yep, 2019. That's right. I always have to remember I have to say that on the podcast. October 19th, 2019, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Head over to the website.
So what are you going to do in the webinar?
We are going to, it's scheduled for 2 hours. So in 15-minute increments.
It's going to be live? Or?
Yep, it's going to be live. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. And we're going to go over a lot of the nuggets that are in the course and some questions that we've gotten along the way.
So it's like an introductory course?
Yeah. We're going to talk about niches, which is something we've talked about today. Just a lot of little stuff here and there, and just answer questions. I think it's sort of our first, since our last live course, it's our first sort of live facing thing since then. And we're just wanting to be there as a resource for people to help and answer questions and offer what we can. This is really just about, someone said the other day, like, why are you giving the book away for free? And I'm like, because it's important to me. Like, it's important to me that people don't have to be afraid of this anymore. They don't have to struggle through this anymore. It matters. It matters at my level. It matters, like I was talking about before, on a societal level. Like, I care. I care about this enough that I just want you to have it. So.
Well, that does it for that episode. Thanks for joining us out there. Again, go to openyourpractice.com/access to access the newsletter and also this introductory webinar.
And the course is available there too. It'll prompt you to get the book first, and then the next page will be the course. It's set up that way intentionally because I want you to have both. So
they get the book for free?
Yeah. So the right now, I know this is evergreen. So currently, I don't know if it's always going to be this way, but currently we're giving the book away for free. We just ask you to pay for small shipping and handling kind of deal. So you put in your info for that, and then we'll send that off to you. The next page that it sort of shifts you to is the description of the course and what you would get for that. And then you can pick that up as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
And take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.